Good morning, I'm Raquel the Bell on the one and only WWNN 1470. Today in the studio we have Tracy from We Are the People. You can join her every Monday night from 7 to 7:30 p.m. on her website, WeAreThePeople.tv. Tracy tackles the student loan dilemma and offers viable options. And now, here's Tracy.
Good evening, and we are back. It's about 7 o'clock Monday night, and Jeffrey Van Treese has joined me again. He's here on this station at WNN 1470 AM on tomorrow night, actually, right?
Right, yeah.
6:30?
6.
6 to 6:30. So join him tomorrow night. He's come back so we can finish our discussion on Citizens United. That is just one of my pet peeves, this whole big money
And it's
in
getting
politics.
worse.
It is getting worse. And there's a lot of groups out there. Now, last week I talked about Represent Us or Represent.us. You can find them on Facebook as well as Citizens United DC. You put a facebook.com/ in front of those, or just search when you go to Facebook. They are public pages, as is We Are the People Students for Liberty. So you can go on to those pages at any time without even having a Facebook account of your own. So you can also find us at our website live right now, WeAreThePeople.tv. And we play on iHeartRadio now, too. That's pretty cool, isn't it?
All over the place.
Yeah, so things are growing. So I'm glad you came back because, you know, we went over a lot of things last week. So even if we touch on that stuff again, I'm not going to, we did so much so fast that I don't think it would hurt. So do you want to recap a little bit, or do you want to go right into front groups?
I think we can recap a little bit. It is such a can of worms.
It is a can of worms.
With Citizens United. It's basically, that's a Supreme Court decision from 2010 where the Supreme Court ruled that you can have unlimited campaign contributions, and what ultimately, it's a very long ruling, but the main points of the ruling is that it ruled that corporations are people for purposes of the First Amendment, and that they have freedom of speech, and that when they give money,
just kills
when they give money for purposes to a political action committee for campaigning, they are in effect speaking. So it's controversial on both of those fronts. You have a situation now where you can have, corporations or groups of corporations that can just give unlimited amounts of money for purposes of either campaigning for candidates or for a particular cause, which, we've seen that gets into the whole front group thing. But, that's what we essentially have created out of PACs and super PACs for candidates, where you have a political action committee which runs ads for certain candidates.
And I'm so sick of those ads. I don't know about you, but I'm just sick of them.
But they're able to give without limit. And that's what's different from giving to candidates. There are limits on what you can give to a specific candidate's campaign. So if you wanted to give money to Jeb Bush,
he only
Hillary,
gets so much, but yet you can give this PAC unlimited money, and they can run as many slanderous commercials with no accountability as they want to.
With no accountability. And what's really, you don't know whether to laugh or cry when you think about this, because the people that are running the PACs are, in many cases, business associates or people that are very close to the candidates themselves. This is one of the things that I really like that Donald Trump has brought up in his campaign, saying that
he is pointing the fingers at everything.
He's really pointing the fingers, because he's pointing out that Jeb Bush is going out and playing golf every weekend with his super PAC chairman, but they're not allowed to talk because they're not supposed to talk to each other.
Right? Yeah, they don't talk to each other.
They're not. It would be a big scandal if they were coordinating. It's just kind of a wink, wink, nod, nod, and it's totally unpoliced. So you have this sort of ridiculous system where you can't give to the campaign itself, but you can give to super PACs, and they can just spend without limit whatever they want on a candidate's campaign with respect to advertising.
And then the thing is sometimes you see a fact check, sometimes you don't. But this is very misleading for the average American. They come home, they have been at work all day, the kids are there, they sit down, they're trying to have dinner, watch a little news, and this is all they see. So not everybody's on Facebook 100 hours a day. And even if you are, what do you believe? I mean, why is there no accountability for the lies that they tell? And a lot of it is literally lies. That's the problem.
Well, it's freedom of speech, so they can, if they're expressing an opinion, they can say whatever they want. And according to our Constitution, our Supreme Court has ruled that our Constitution identifies speech as including money. So giving money is speech. So it's like we were saying last week, it's yours and mine and some, Joe Sixpack. It's our speech / money versus the speech / money coming from Walmart or ExxonMobil or the insurance industry or whatever.
And
we can't possibly
all opinions, so they aren't held accountable for anything.
They're not really held accountable, and then you have to deal with the fact that the candidates themselves are public figures, so it's not as though they can really have any claim for slander. They can pretty much say whatever they want, or they can take something that's true and just make it twist somebody's words,
take
or
it out of context.
Take it out of context.
I mean, that's what Rush Limbaugh used to do. I mean, that's when I was a Republican until I watched him take everything out of context so much, and then started actually noticing that.
Well,
and it means something totally different when you do that.
Well, we've seen this also on a more local level, not just with presidential campaign, not only with local politics, but also with judges that have to run for re-election. You have, there was a case that there was a book written about it by John Grissom. I think it was a fictional book, but it was based on the true story of a judge. His name was Oliver Diaz in Mississippi, and he was essentially run out of office based on negative ads from insurance companies primarily because he was seen as being too generous to the plaintiffs, the people that were...
So the insurance companies didn't like him, and they
slandered
him, basically.
They just slandered him. They took rulings that he had made just completely out of context. They would say, well, he was a criminal judge at one time. They said he released inmates that were convicted of really awful crimes, and would just leave out all kinds of details that...
Well, they're doing that right now, aren't they?
They do it all the time. They just take things completely out of context, and you just get a snippet of it, and you think, well, that's a bad person. They try to just make people look ridiculous, and we're seeing more of that. I remember seeing an ad last election cycle in 2012 where they said the candidate, I think it was for a House of Representatives for the state of Florida, where a particular candidate was being repeatedly referred to as, well, this person just doesn't care about you. I didn't even know whether he was a Republican, Democrat, or whatever he was. I didn't know what they were talking about. All they said was he doesn't care. He doesn't care about you, the voter. And I thought that's amazing. They don't even have to give a specific detail, a reason. He just doesn't care.
Just doesn't care.
So this is, I think it's really gotten out of hand. And like we were saying last week, we're probably going to have a constitutional amendment, or we're going to have some new Supreme Court appointees that are going to rule that...
I wish they just shut down the PACs altogether. But nobody really wants that to happen.
Well, yeah.
Because as many groups as there are out there fighting that, I mean, there's not a whole lot of headway being made on this.
Well, you'll never be able to outshout the United States Chamber of Commerce and the rest of the Wall Street and large corporations, because they can just outspend you. There's no way that any grassroots movement is going to be able to compete with them with respect to airtime and advertising. It's just not going to happen.
So that means it's up to you. That means you have to go in search of the group that you find an easy fit for. Now, one of the groups that we mentioned last week was Represent Us, as I mentioned before, and also Citizens United DC. So there are a lot of grassroots organizations. The American Way also is fighting against big money. These are nonpartisan groups. There's a lot of people involved in these things. It's not just Democrats. It's not just liberals. I mean, people are starting to see what this trouble is. And every time I get an email on my phone, a political email, it's like, Boehner and so-and-so and this one and that one and this PAC and that PAC, they're spending, and the Koch brothers too.
Well, Boehner was one of the original people after Citizens United that came out and said, this is great. We have more free speech. It's so great that Walmart can speak more. It's just because they didn't have enough control beforehand. Now they can speak without limit when they give money. And of course, like I was saying, also last week with respect to the First Amendment. If they are people, if a corporation is a human being for purposes of the Bill of Rights, then shouldn't they have all the other Bill of Rights, which would include the right to?
Could you imagine?
Oh, the right to a trial by a jury of your peers.
Yeah, I remember when you were talking about that. That's
And,
still.
I mean,
That's
it's
nuts.
it's just
Be
ridiculous.
careful. Don't give them any ideas.
Right.
All right. So let's talk about these front groups.
Yes. Well, Front Group, it's basically an organization that sort of represents itself as a grassroots, movement. When in reality it isn't. It's something that tries to make itself look like it's for the benefit of everyday citizens, but in reality, it's pushing a corporate agenda or a Wall Street agenda, as the case may be. You mentioned the Koch brothers; they're in charge of and have funded a number of different front groups, including
And think tanks.
Think tanks. Well, yeah, and they're all related. Like Freedom Partners is one that the Koch brothers founded. Another one is Americans for Prosperity. That's the big one.
See, now that really sounds like a grassroots organization. This is all of us Americans getting together, and we're going to do what? What is it actually?
Well, what they say is they want to
quite the opposite.
Well, they say they're for prosperity because they are against red tape, and to them, red tape includes the minimum wage, right? So they want to eliminate the minimum wage. They want to crush the unions. They want to eliminate. Collective bargaining for unions. They also want to transfer all have a movement where all states have right to work laws, like we have in Florida.
Oh, yes, you
Or
can
right
get
to
fired
work.
because it's Tuesday.
You get fired for any reason, and that's misleading. They call
It's raining outside, you're fired.
Right,
I
so
mean, that's about what it amounts to,
it's
too. You
basically-
really have no recourse.
you have no recourse. You can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. Essentially, that's what a right to work state means. And they're also, of course, trying to stop any type of environmental regulation at all, including cap and trade, global warming. They're against that.
Well, yeah, they have their own scientists, don't they? I mean, that say this is all crap? Or did they just
Right.
make that up and put a scientist's name on it? I mean,
Well,
you can buy anybody if you have enough money.
That's essentially the case, and they were actually the biggest financial influence with respect to the Tea Party movement, Tea Party candidates outside of PACs,
Yeah.
political action committees. So that's the Koch brothers. They're considered the biggest people outside of government or rather they have the biggest influence on government for all people outside of government, which is quite scary.
And there's a lot of stuff on them on YouTube, actually, and you should take a look at it. Now, the thing that's concerning to me, though, is unions were always meant to be a good thing, but I can't believe how many Americans are just totally anti-union right now.
I think this is what we're seeing. Their speech has changed people's minds. It has, when people see something repeated over and over again, they think it's
It
true.
is, well, they don't call it programming for nothing.
They don't call it programming. This was really started, I think it was in the 30s or 40s. It was a relative of Sigmund Freud that's actually coined the term public relations. It's an interesting term, public relations. That is, it's the relationship between those at the top and everybody else. It's
Right.
sort of the unwashed masses, the 99.67% or whatever, versus the 1/3 of 1%. And there's only two ways of controlling a population. You can either use direct force, as a police state, or you can use control of opinion. And that's what we have here in the United States, and that's what we've had for some time. It's control of opinion through the media, through advertising, and so forth.
And it's not real journalism anymore.
No, it's not.
It used to be that, I mean, this is my show, so I'm going to come on here and I'm going to make faces and I'm going to make my opinions known and I'm going to say things. But when you watch a newscast and you can tell what they think by the looks on their faces when they're reading stuff and they're snarking and they're making opinions, I mean, that's not journalism. Journalism's supposed to be unbiased. It's supposed to be both sides of the story. You're not supposed to agree or disagree on camera.
Well, it's supposed to be reporting the facts, and then people can
And
decide.
not just one side.
And not just one side. What we have here is a system where certain facts are scrupulously excluded, and only other facts are included in order to sway the way that people think. So if we
Well-
only hear one side of the story, we don't hear the other side. There might be a whole bunch of facts that we're not hearing about anything, and so it can warp people's opinion outside of what it would otherwise be if they were getting the full story.
Well, it does, even with the unions. I mean, people complain about the unions being able to fund candidates, but what they're not realizing is they're holding on to Citizens United because this is what their party's agenda is, and they don't know all the details. I mean, come on, most of us don't. I learn something new every day, and I learned that I was wrong about a lot of things. But yet, Citizens United is who also made it possible for the unions to give the money as well.
Well, they're just playing the game that has been created, so they have to play the game.
Yeah, you
and
have
they're going to
and
lose.
they don't have the money.
They don't have
I mean,
the money.
they're not. How do you compete with,
I mean, think
billionaires?
of the auto workers union versus the automobile industry.
And they've crushed it
So
slowly over the years. And union used to be a good thing. And I understand because, they always use we're always being judged by the bad examples. Okay, there's been bad unions out there where they're lazy and they don't do things. And this is always the people they compare everybody to. I mean, my father's side of the family, they were coal miners. I mean, we needed those unions. People were dying and being killed by big money people as well because they didn't want those unions in place. And, it's like with student loans or being on welfare or Section 8 or anything, going to college. Oh, yes, why should we give free college so they can go party? I ran across that one today from a friend of mine. Well, yeah, we're going to pay for them to go party for 4 years. No, not everybody's like that. As a matter of fact, I think the partiers would be the frat house boys whose parents are pretty wealthy and, they're paying the studious one to do their term paper for them.
Well, one of the things that I think is remarkably unreported is how does the United States' services, social services, education, government benefits, healthcare, et cetera, how does it compare to other industrialized countries? Because often in the United States we assume we don't have a choice. We assume that we can't have universal health care or single-payer health care.
But it's not a matter of changing just one thing, and that's what people don't understand. Oh, well, we can't do this. No, you can't just do one thing and expect it to work. The whole system needs to be overhauled.
Yeah, we have a system that ultimately it rewards misinformation, and
Yeah,
and
if
it
you're a
rewards
thief,
bad
you
behavior. Yeah.
you get a severance package to leave this company, and then you get hired making more money at the next one.
We saw it actually. Eric Holder before he went out, the Attorney General actually testified before Congress that you have these too big to jail companies.
It's ridiculous.
He was referring to Wall Street and all the scandals with J.P. Morgan Chase and so forth. Oh,
please. They've been a pain in the ass since 1910.
Well, and he's basically admitted they're too big to actually bring charges against when they commit fraud. And then you look at it and say, the person on the street that commits any crime at all, how quickly and fast it is that person.
Oh yeah. Well, even in Chase, when I was trying to open up the bank accounts for the nonprofit, you're supposed to be able to pick your titles. There's certain regulations and laws that are in place, and you can say, I want to be, an executive director as opposed to a vice president or a president, that kind of thing for nonprofit status. And the bank that we went to, SunTrust, actually allowed us to be who we wanted to be. But Chase was like, oh no. This is we don't do that. You can't, so we had the laws and everything all out there and quoted this and that and the other, and they're like, well, it doesn't matter what the law says. This is what we do. And they showed me an in-house document. I said, can I have a copy of that? She goes, no, this is internal. I can't give you that. But it actually, they're above the law. They are literally above the law. They do what they want.
And they can give money to front groups if they want to without limit. The other thing is with these front groups is that they can accept as much money and they don't have to report it. They don't have to report their donors at all. And that's pretty scary.
Now, isn't that changing though? I mean, they're
possibly there's movements to change.
Well, there's a lot of movements out there to change this kind of thing, but I thought that it had been some kind of ruling or something
possibly
that
with the
had.
political action committees. But as far as I know, front groups are still nonprofit organizations. They're tax exempt. They're charities. They're considered charities. So it's a charity whose purpose, instead of things that we would think of that a charity does, like feeding the poor and so forth, trying to cure diseases. Instead, this is a charity that crushes unions. That's a charitable organization.
That's lovely. How's that charitable?
It's considered a charity.
Well,
under this
there's like
organization.
27 or 29 different types of nonprofit organizations out there.
We talked, or I talked on my show a while back about the NFL as a charity.
Yeah,
And
they
pays
are
no
a
taxes.
nonprofit. Well, something with that changed. I remember reading.
They get all kinds of goodies from the host
Although their
cities.
merchandising is taxed.
Their merchandising is taxed, but they don't actually pay taxes on much of the revenue that they bring in.
Right, and they're supposed to be okay with that because they provide hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Well, the logic is that all of the teams, all of the franchises pay taxes, and therefore the NFL is a trade organization that doesn't have to pay taxes. Of course, that's really problematic because it is acting as its own entity, sort of like a parent company and a subsidiary. It's acting as its own entity, and it should
that's
have
like
to pay.
Sally Mae and the collectors. They have all their own people. So yeah, what was that about the children and the grandchildren of
Right.
our free speech here?
Yeah, I was saying, arguably it's the parent company that has a subsidiary. The subsidiary should be the child of the parent corporation and so forth. So, for example, we talked about the media. ABC and for example, the network should be the child of Disney because Disney owns ABC. And so if you looked at a chart and saw all of the media outlets, they're basically just owned by very large corporate entities. And
they all trace back to five.
They all
Six.
trace back to 5 or 6.
Yeah. I always get the banks and the media companies mixed up. One's 5, one's 6. But, so the same thing is going on with the banks. It's pretty scary out there. It's time to get involved. So let's talk about who some of these front companies are. Do you have a list of them?
Well, we talked about some of them before, the Koch brothers, the Americans
That's the
for
big one.
Prosperity, and the Freedom Partners. Others include groups from all sorts of industry sectors, such as the Center for Consumer Freedom.
Oh, that
sounds
sounds
great.
like very grassrootsy.
It sounds very grassrootsy. Its stated mission is to defend the rights of consumers to eat, drink, and smoke as they please. But in reality, it's basically backed entirely by the tobacco, restaurant, and alcoholic beverage industries, which provide all of its funding. So they want to do things like limit the reporting requirements or the labeling requirements for manufacturers.
Oh, so
of food.
GMOs would be under that heading too, right?
That's another issue with corporate personhood. Monsanto has filed a lawsuit against Vermont that would have required them that actually
They don't want to label.
to label. And what they say is that they are being required to speak against their will. And they're actually using an old case that came from Jehovah's Witnesses and the children of Jehovah's Witnesses that didn't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance. And the Supreme Court ruled quite reasonably that that's a form of compelled speech and that the right to speak includes the right not to speak. And if somebody doesn't want to say the Pledge of Allegiance, you
don't
can't
have
force
to,
them to
right.
speak. And that made sense. It's religious freedom, and it's something that most people would agree with. But they have taken, Monsanto's taken this argument to the point where they're saying that they're a corporation, they're a person, and therefore because they're a person with First Amendment rights, they cannot be forced to label their products because they're being forced to speak, just like the Jehovah's Witness would be forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance against his religious
That's what they're doing.
That's what they're arguing.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
We're seeing, more and more arguments like that. McDonald's, for example, they're arguing equal protection violation. They're comparing them. McDonald's, the company, is comparing itself to freed slaves in a sense, which was the 14th Amendment, which was an equal protection, saying that you had to have equal treatment under the law for people of different based on racial classification.
Right.
And so that they're saying is, again, McDonald's is a person, and it's a franchise, and that there were minimum wage laws. I think it was in Oregon that, or maybe it was Washington State. It was on the West Coast, but there were minimum wage laws that applied to franchises that did not apply to non-franchises, companies that were not. So they're saying that the classification based on being a franchise is the same thing as classification based upon race.
That's
And
ridiculous.
sounds ridiculous, right? But it's a person. We've ruled that corporations are people.
Come on, people. We got to get rid of this stuff. You have to. I mean, 2016's coming up. We've got more money into this election than anyone in the history.
I'd like to see candidates talk about it. I'd just like to see people answer for it. I mean, if they're really for Citizens United, then they should be asked questions like what we're talking about now. Do you really think that McDonald's has equal protection rights? Do you really think that Monsanto?
But everything's so contrived. I mean, did you watch the first
watched it.
Republican debate?
Yeah.
I mean, that first question out of the box was for Donald Trump. It was so contrived, that whole first opening. I'm trying not to say bad words. I'm on AM radio, right?
Yeah, it was clearly aimed at him. And
It was. I mean, come on. They don't ask real questions.
No, they don't. And even the stuff that became controversial, it was the
And then they're fighting. I mean, I've seen teenagers behave better than them.
Oh, absolutely. And they're fighting over frivolous things. I think it's just a way to distract us from what really matters, so they can talk about whether a certain word is offensive or a statement is offensive.
Yes. Well, they're cutting us off early tonight. So, any last words?
I would just say, try to get educated. Try to, you're not going to get educated from the media, so you really got to go out and do your own research.
You do have to do your own. So
And stay
check,
vigilant.
Yes, and just Google Citizens United or go to Facebook and search what they've got there. Those two groups, like I said, you can find them. You don't even have to be on Facebook, but it's important. I cannot stress that enough. This election coming up is going to be bad. I'm so glad I don't have a TV, because I can't stand those ads. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And join us next week. I'm actually not going to be here. I'm not sure what we're doing next week. A couple things have fallen through. So Jeff's on tomorrow night, 6 to 6:30, right here on WNN 1470. And do you play live on your website too?
Yes, we do.
Okay, what's your website?
Website is oltmanpatent.com. That's oltmanpatent.com.
All right, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us.
You have been listening to We Are the People with social advocate Tracy Marks, who every week bring to the light the needs and changes in our current system. Tune in every Monday night at 7 p.m. on WeAreThePeople.tv and participate in the conversation in the chat room or call 888-565-1470. Tune in next Monday for more information and facts and stay aware of your surroundings and challenges at all times.